Hi folks, and welcome back to the course. In this lesson, we will set the light for a night ambience. First, let's adjust the auto exposure settings. Here in Settings and Project Settings, let's search for exposure. And here in auto exposure, we have a lot of options. In this case, I will set this to false and this to 0. Now, here in our content browser, in the engine content, if you don't have this folder, here in settings, make sure that show engine content is enabled. So here in content, let's search for BP_sky sphere, and let's add it to our level. Let's set the location to the origin, and let's add it to this folder. This is pretty much the same as this one, so we can delete this. The difference is that this one is a blueprint that actually has a sky sphere mesh and a lot more of functionality that we will use. So the first thing, here in override settings, let's change the sun height. Let's set to -1. Now as you can see, we can now look at the stars. We can change the star brightness. I will leave it something like this. Also the cloud opacity. Something like this works good for me. And also the cloud speed. But I will leave this value to the default. We don't need to change most of the parameters in the level, because the default values when we create this new level are okay for this project. Now let's go to the directional light. And let's make sure that the atmosphere sunlight is enabled. Now here in our directional light, if we click on the directional light in our level and then press Ctrl and L, we can see this and set more easily our directional light. I recommend you some configuration to cast some interesting shadows, something like this, something that the light is at the horizon. I will choose something like this. I like this one. And now let's adjust the intensity. I will set this to 0.5. It looks a lot darker, but it still not looks like a night, like a proper night. So let's change one of the most important parameters here. That is the light color. In most series, movies, in night scenes, they use blue light to kind of replicate the moonlight, even while the moonlight is white, they use this blue color to give that sense. We can change the intensity to something like this just while we adjust this. I like this color. I will click OK and take the intensity back to 0.5. It's very dark, but that's why we will give in future lessons a flashlight to the player, so we can make the player to use a flashlight. So now let's add some final settings. Here in the exponential height fog, let's search for volumetric fog and click to enable it. Now we can play with the scattering distribution. Let's see how we change our scene. Do you notice the changes? Look at the sun rays, or moon rays in this case. I like this kind of effect. I will leave it to 0.8. Finally, the directional light, let's search for the volumetric scattering intensity. Let's play a little with this. You can add as much as you want. I will leave it to the 0.3. I mean to 3, not 0.3. So we have this kind of look. Let's click the play button and test this right out. Looks good, right? Now it looks like a proper night ambience. It's still a little light for my personal taste, but it's okay for now. I want this to be a lot dark so we can make the player use a flashlight, and that will be our next lesson. So I will see you there. Hi folks, and welcome back to the course. In this lesson we will learn how to create a flashlight and set it to the player. Okay, so let's open up the content drawer. Here in the first person folder in blueprints, let's double click on PP first person character. And here in the viewport, let's add here in the components, let's add spotlight. Let's put in here in the first person camera. Let's change the parameters. Here in the intensity, I will set the values to the maximum. I will leave this as the default values. I will change the attenuation radius to 5000. The inner cone angle to 3. And the outer cone angle to 18. So it looks like this. Let's test this very quickly on the editor. Works good, right? But now we have always turned on our light. So let's add a blueprint so we can turn on and off. First here in Edit, in Project Settings, let's search for Input. Here in Action Mappings, let's create this one called Flashlight. And here select the key value. In this case, I will like to use the left mouse button. You can also add another one like the Q key, or any key that you want. But for me, these two works good. I will mostly be using the left mouse button. So let's open up again our blueprint, and here in the event graph, let's right click. Let's search for flashlight. And here let's use a flip-flop, because we only have two states, turn it on and turn it off. So when we press our input action, it will change from A to B. So now let's get a reference to our spotlight, and let's set the visibility, in this case to true. So when it's A, it will turn on. Let's duplicate this one. And when it's B, it will turn off. Let's compile. There's an error. Oh, remember to set the reference. Let's compile again. And now everything is working good. Let's try this out. Now we can turn on and turn off. One thing that I would like to change is the spotlight to be turned off first. So here, invisible, make sure to turn this to false. Working good, right? But this does not have too much functionality if the player can have always turned on the flashlight. So, as a challenge, you have to add a battery life to the torchlight. I will show you the solution to this in the next lesson. So, good luck, and I'll see you there. Hi folks, and welcome back to the course. How was the challenge? In this lesson, we will see a possible solution to this problem. So let's open up our BP first person character. Let's modify this a little bit. Let's take this a little too far so we have plenty of space to work. And for now, let's just break this link, because we are using a different approach now. We will use this and a branch node. So when is the flip-flop state A, this will be true. And from now, let's create a new variable called battery. It will be a float. Let's compile this and set the default value to 1. We're setting this to 1 to simplify our work when we create the UI. So now we want to decrease this value. So let's set a new value. So if it's the A state, so if this is true, let's change the value. And for this, let's do a subtraction. And how much do we want to subtract? Well, we want to subtract 1 unit per second. And to this, let's use the event tick. So every second, we are decreasing 1 unit. Now let's make a new branch node. And if this value is greater or equal to 0, we can turn on the flashlight. But if it's less than 0, we turn off. Let's test this out. Working good, right? But it lasts only 1 second because we are decreasing 1 unit every second and our battery default value is 1. So to avoid this, let's use a multiplier here. And, for example, if we want this to last 2 seconds, we have to divide 1 divided by 2. So it's 0.5. Let's try this again. And now it lasted 2 seconds. But maybe we want this to last a little bit more. So we have to divide 1 by the seconds that we want this to last. In this case, maybe let's try with 5 seconds, just to test this math. So it's 0.2. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Working good, right? So I think a good time for this is 30 seconds. So let's divide 1 by 30. 0.03. And now our battery will last 30 seconds. Let's try this out. So now this lasts 30 seconds. But how do we know that? We can't print the value. It will not look very good, I think. So in the next lesson, we will create a progress bar, a UI, to see how much battery do we have left to use. So I will see you in the next one. Hi folks, and welcome back to the course. In this lesson, we will create a widget blueprint to show how much battery do we have. So let's open up our content browser. Here in the course folder, let's create a new one called UI. Here, let's search for user interface and create a widget blueprint. We're using a user widget. Let's call this widget bp underscore HUD. Double click to open it. Let's maximize this. And let's first add a canvas panel. Just drag and drop. We have something like this. Now let's add a progress bar. And let's set the anchors. Here I will like this one. So press Ctrl and Shift, then left click. I would like to have it like here and maybe this size. A little bit longer. I think just like this. And I will set the fill color to green. This one. Let's try this out. Looks good. Now let's create a binding to our percent. So this fills with our battery variable. So click here in bind, create binding. Here in get percent, let's cast to bp underscore first person character and let's get the player character. Now here we can get the battery. And that's it. Now if we play our game, we won't see anything yet because we need to create our widget and then add to our viewport. And for this, we're gonna use a game mode. Here, in our world settings, if you don't have this, you can find it here in Window, World Settings. Now let's search for the game mode. In this case, we don't have a game mode, but by default, we have one. If we go to Project Settings, we can search here in Maps and Modes. We have a default game mode, the PP First Person game mode. We can search this in our content browser. It's here in the first person and blueprints folder. We can double click to open it. And if it's the first time that we open this, it will show something like this. So let's click here in Open Full Blueprint Editor. And now we have this. Here we can create our widget. So let's use an event, pick and play. And let's create widget BP. Create widget. And let's search this one, the one that we create. And this is not enough. We have loaded in memory, but we have to add it to the viewport. So let's add to viewport. And that's it. This is the default game mode that is by default when we use the first person template. You can create another game mode and change it, but I recommend you to use this one. You can also set another one here in the world settings if you want to override this. But for now, let's try this out. Let's hit the play button. And there it is. Working good. You can adjust this as you want. If you want another color in your progress bar, if you want the progress bar to be thinner, to be a little bit more bigger, you can adjust this as you want. So in the next lesson, we will add actually an enemy to our game. So I will see you in the next one.